Hello, my name is Melanie. I serve on the leadership team with Christian Home Educators of Ohio. For the past 30 or more years, CHIO has sought to encourage and support families who are just learning about home education and deciding to do home education for themselves and their families. We believe that biblical education is an important part of our Christian faith, and that homeschooling is an exciting opportunity to experience that. So the purpose of this video is to help you become familiar with our state regulations and comfortable with the notification process. So what I'm going to ask you to do is pause the video and go to our website, which is chiohome.org. That's CHEOHOME.org. And you're going to log on, pull up the forms that are necessary for our discussion in this video. You will go to the link that says Homeschool 101, and then click on the tab that says Just the Forms and Regs. When you get to that page, you will either print or pull up the notification form, the state regulations, assessment option 1, and assessment option number 2. And then come back and we'll get started. Before we get into the process of notifying through the state regulations, I'd like to share a couple of thoughts with you. I have served on staff with CHIO for more than 25 years. We home educated all of our children, kindergarten through 12th grade. They have completed their respective degrees in their fields of studies. They have their own families. We now are enjoying, at this time, 5 grandchildren. But for us, the decision to home educate was not an easy one. In fact, it was quite challenging because I was a public school teacher. All my life, I thought that's where the Lord was directing my steps. From the time I was a little girl, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And it was very difficult to think that the Lord was changing the direction for that. And so we had to learn how to pray about it with an open heart and an open mind. But looking back, if we had to do it all over again, it was the best decision we made. I would do it 1,000 times over. But if you're coming into home education thinking you're going to create perfect children, let me officially bust that bubble for you. That's not going to be possible. Home education is a lot like parenting. There's a lot that the Lord will teach you along the way, but it is very doable. And really what the Lord calls you to do, He will equip you to accomplish. The other thing I want to share with you is just a thought, because my grandmother passed away when I was 13. And when she passed away, she wrote a letter to her children, which would have been my mother and her 5 siblings. Very sweet letter. She shared a little bit about her experience as a mom, shared some scriptures that were special to her. But she emphasized the fact that she could not will her faith to her children. And she wanted them to understand that it was so important to her for them to make sure her grandchildren knew the way home. So she had what I would call generational vision. She understood that parenting is not about just raising your children until they get to be 18 and can live independently, be out on their own, maybe have a successful life by any measure of standards. But even when your children are little, you are literally raising the parents of your grandchildren. And in the home education experience, that's a lot more time on task. So your children are watching how the Lord is teaching you, learn how to solve problems, getting through the ups and downs of life. So that's sort of an extended look at home education. Yes, the academics are important, but the Lord is much more concerned about relationships with Him. So you will have the unique opportunity of shepherding your children in their walk of faith as well. So let's get started with the regulations and the notification. The state regulations in Ohio are moderate compared to other states, but you are in the driver's seat for every decision. The state will provide a framework for what subjects are to be covered each year, but every decision point will belong to you. That is extremely freeing. Ohio's compulsory school age is 6 through 18. So if your child is 6, you will need to send a written notification of your intent to home educate to your local superintendent. In Ohio, we don't have regulations in state law. They are in the administrative code, which sometimes referred to as administrative rules. So the regulations are based on a statute that sits in the compulsory attendance portion of the law. So when you notify of your intent to home educate, you're going to inform your local superintendent of that intent, provide the paperwork that's required, and he will issue a letter of excusal from compulsory attendance. The whole purpose of that is to comply with Ohio's truancy statutes. If you're not enrolled in school, in the public school, you have to be enrolled somewhere. What this process does is that it excuses you from enrollment so that you can home educate and not formally be enrolled in a public or private school. If you are coming to home education and your children are older, maybe they were in a public or private school last year, you will need to notify with the paperwork that we're going to describe. If your child is kindergarten age, not yet age 6, you can home educate, but you do not need to notify because no one is expecting your child to be in a classroom anywhere at age 5. So you can home educate. You do not have to fill out any paperwork. You can come back and look at this video next year. If you are moving to Ohio, you will need to submit a notification within 1 week that you begin residing in a school district. If you withdraw your child partway through the year, you can withdraw, let's say it's a school safety issue. You can withdraw immediately, and then you have 1 school week to complete the paperwork to notify. And there's no issues at all then with the compulsory attendance statutes. I'd like to start, if you can pull out the state regulations, I'd like to start just briefly talking about the first rule. It says -01, definitions. And if you look at the definition for home education, it states that home education is primarily directed and provided by the parent or guardian when the child is of compulsory school age. And I've already mentioned that that's age 6 through 18, and they are not enrolled in a non-public school. Primarily directed and provided is awesome because that means you can ask someone else to help teach your child a subject that you're not comfortable teaching. Maybe it's an art class, maybe it's a higher level math class. That is totally your discretion on any of the subjects at any grade level. The superintendent in this definition section is the superintendent of the school district in which you reside. So we will see through the notification rule that you're going to be submitting your notification to the local superintendent. The school district may direct you to submit it to somebody else, like an educational service center or another entity. Please do not do that. The regulations state that you are to submit your notification to the local superintendent. That is the only person you should be focused on turning in your paperwork to. If you look through then at the second rule, it is rescinded. It used to be a statement of purpose, which had a very important concept included in there that the purpose of the rules was to safeguard the primary right of parents to provide the education for their children. When they made the recommendation to rescind this rule, we explained how important that concept was and we didn't want to lose it. They've then folded it into the third rule. So we didn't lose the concept, it's just the introductory paragraph into the third rule. The third rule then is the notification. And that process has forms that we have developed to help you do it very easily. There are 10 parts that you have to include in your notification of intent. If you will look at the form that says notification, home education notification form, we have created this and used it for almost 30 years. And it has never once caused a family to not have their notification be successfully submitted. So you can depend completely on this form. If you fill out all the pieces and parts, you'll be golden. The deadline for submitting your notification is in that second paragraph, where it states that the parent shall supply the following information to the superintendent no later than the first week of the start of school. They will have 14 days to review it to make sure all the pieces and parts are included. And then they have to let you know after that 14-day window that in writing that your child is excused from compulsory attendance. So you'll be looking for a letter to come back from the superintendent. Because they have 2 weeks to look at it, we normally recommend that you send in your notification 2 weeks before the start of school. That way you can get your letter back relatively quickly and possibly even before school begins. But your deadline, so your child is not considered truant, your drop-dead deadline is the end of the first week of school. You can do it sooner, but no later than that deadline. I'd like to basically start with the notification form itself. All of the components on this form that you will fill out, one per family, not one per child. You will, the number 2, for example, where it says telephone number is optional, your email is optional. They truly are optional. They're listed in the regulations, but they are listed as optional. You can hard copy mail this paperwork in a way that allows you to get a receipt of delivery, maybe certified mail, or you can scan it and email it, asking them to confirm that they have received it. You need something to identify when they received it so that you know when the 14-day window for their review starts. If you don't get a letter back in good time from the local district, you can check in with them politely and ask if they could send you back your letter of excusal. But if you run into difficulties, for example, your child wasn't enrolled in school last year, someone is expecting your child to be there this year and they're not in their seat, and you get a knock on your door from a truant officer wondering where your child is, at least you will have a copy, keep a copy of what you submitted, a copy of the fact that they have received it, and you'll be fine. No problems there. The number 4 on the notification form, where it talks about the name and birth date, if you use a form from the school district, sometimes they ask for the grade level. It's only the birth date that you're required to provide, not the child's grade level. There's a lot of different reasons for that. You may have a child who has some developmental delays. Maybe they're not on a particular grade level that matches their age. All you're required to provide the district is their birth date, which gives them their age. The next part, I'm going to skip for a second on the different subjects, except to say, number 5, you're providing them an assurance that you will cover those subject areas. Language, reading, spelling, writing, geography, history, math, science, health, phys ed, fine arts, including music, first aid, safety, and fire prevention. Do you have to instruct in fire prevention every single year that you notify? Yes. That doesn't mean you are spending a semester on fire prevention. It can be one lesson. It can be a field trip to a fire station. It can be a video on fire safety or making a plan of escape for your home in case there is a fire. It can be anything you choose it to be. There are no time qualifications in this list. The brief outline in number 6, you will create per child. Even though the notification form is one per family, the brief outline of what you intend to cover, and the number 7, the list of textbooks, correspondence, commercial curricula, those are provided per child. So this does not have to be complicated. A brief outline, though, is a brief outline. You cannot just say, we're going to cover all of the subjects. That does not count as an outline. So if I have an example here of an outline that we did with our children, what the purpose of showing you this is just to give you one example. I know you can't read it. I'm just going to describe how I laid it out, because you're going to create your own outline. I really don't want you copying mine, except I found it very easy to identify each of the subject areas, and under each subject area, just like it's stated on the form, language, reading, spelling, writing, and then I made a list of what we intended to cover in those areas. And then letter B, geography, history of the United States and Ohio, just like it's on the list, and then underneath it, what we intended to cover. If your list matches the list in the regulations, then all they have to do is go down and go check, 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 everything's here, because the regulations are very specific that your outline is for informational purposes only. They are not evaluating whether it's complete enough. They are not evaluating whether it's good enough for a particular age child, but they have to see that it's there. So an easy way for you to accomplish that, especially if you're new to educating your children and not sure of what should be covered at different grade levels, there are resources. A lot of the curricular companies publish what's called a scope and sequence or a graded course of study. You can find those online. You can Google for those. If I were doing it all over again, I would stay shy of anything that is heavily laden with Common Core state standards. The whole Common Core list came on the scene in 2010. It's got some controversial pieces to it, and it's also a little bit watered down. But if you can find a list that either isn't tied to Common Core state standards or is prior to 2010, you would have a great list. The exact book that I used, you can probably find on Amazon, and it is just simply called What Every Child Needs to Know When. It's published by Robin Scalata. I think Robin may have a different name these days because this book has been around for a while, but there are other resources out there that will help you know and will break down by grade level what concepts are commonly covered at a particular grade level. So that will give you some confidence and some encouragement to make your outline. Then once you're finished with your outline, you'll need to include a list of materials that you will be using. And the materials could be particular textbooks. And by the way, sometimes in the outline, people, if they have a textbook, will choose to make notes from the table of contents because it lists out the concepts that will be covered. So if you already have your curricular materials picked out, you can use them as the basis for making your outline. But if you haven't chosen your materials yet, then you can use the graded course of study or a scope and sequence that's published to give you a general idea of how to do that. So you could include particular published resources and books. You can even use hands-on materials like geoboards or maps. You can talk about, like for art, tempera paints and sculpting clay, or for music, songbooks supplied by a church choir if your child is in a children's choir at church. We included the Bible. We included our county library as a resource. So that's just a list. Again, it's for informational purposes only. So no one in the district, superintendent's office or anyone else, will be coming back to you to say, this list isn't quite complete. It's for informational purposes only. If you include all the pieces and parts, then you'll be good to go. Number 8 is an assurance that your child will be provided a minimum of 900 hours of instruction. This is not a record that you have to keep to turn in to anyone. It's not like you're logging in hours each day and you have to keep that record for submission anywhere. It's for your own records. But you are assuring them that you will provide 900 hours of instruction. That does not mean 900 hours of seat time. In physical education, if you're doing Metro Park hikes, if you are in a community sport, if your child is taking swimming lessons, if you are teaching them how to manage money, and you do some grocery shopping as a way of instructing in that. That all counts. You're going to be teaching your child along life's way. Does it include seat time? Yes, but it's not just seat time. There are many, many other ways that you'll be instructing your children. Number 9, an assurance that the home teacher has one of the following qualifications. They are not asking you to identify which of these fits you. You're simply going to put a little check mark in that line by number 9. So you would have a high school diploma or a certificate of high school equivalence or standardized test scores that demonstrate high school equivalence or another equivalent credential found appropriate by a superintendent. You may have a college degree. It's not necessary to have a college degree to instruct your own children. In fact, I have met thousands of families over the last 25 years in the context of conventions and small group meetings and along the way. And there are plenty of moms who don't have the college degree who are very successfully teaching their own children. And then the number 10 is very important because it says the parents shall affirm the information supplied with his or her signature. So you're not submitting a copy of a high school diploma, for example, to prove that you have a high school diploma. You are affirming that that's true and accurate with your signature. So that is all of the pieces and parts to notification. Once you finish your first year of notifying under these regulations and home educating under these regulations, when you re-notify for next year, you will submit an academic assessment report. So you will have options to choose on what type of report you will submit with your notification the next year, not this year. So in that following year, you will either choose a norm referenced assessment like the Iowa Test of Basic Skills or the California Achievement. If your student is high school, the ACT, the SAT, those scores count toward norm reference assessments. If you choose not to do a norm referenced assessment, well, let's stay on the norm reference assessment. Let me not forget to explain that you are not turning in the entire protocol of the scores, the sheet of the scores that comes back to you. We have assessors listed on CHIO's website. You can contact them. You can contact a testing company and find your assessor. When your child completes their assessment and the results are sent back, they are not sent back to the assessor. They are sent to you. You're responsible then for turning in those results. 25%, the 25th percentile or higher, means that you can continue to home educate without having any oversight as a remedial step. That is not a standard. Please don't think that the 25th percentile is the goal to achieve. That's not a standard. Almost all families fall in the 85th percentile and above. Really, most of them are in the 90th percentile range. The 25th percentile is just a safety net for those who are using that measurable tool. There are sometimes children who will never do well on the paper pencil tests, or even if they do well on a paper pencil test, you may still want to have the written narrative option for your assessment report. So that written narrative option simply means that a state licensed teacher will look over a sample of your child's work to ensure that they are performing to the level of their ability, not to the grade level that people think they should be on, because you may have a second grader who's still performing at early first grade level because of legitimate developmental delays. So that teacher will determine if the child is doing the best to their level of ability. That written narrative is simply the form that's signed by the teacher. It's not a journal. It's not a packet of notes that the assessor turns in. It's simply the signed form where that teacher is assuring that she has reviewed a portfolio of samples of your child's work and is assuring that from her expertise, your child is performing to the best of their ability. When you turn that in, that's all that's necessary is that form. However, to plan for your assessments, since you know you're going to be required to turn in an assessment report, you will want to make your choice early in the school year, contact your assessor so you know what type of samples of your child's work to save. That way you're not scrambling in the spring to pull together things that you may have misplaced or didn't save for one reason or another. Just make it easier on yourself. And you may even decide to do both. Our family did for a number of years. I wanted someone else to look at what my children were doing. It just made me feel a little bit better, even though I have a background in teaching. But I also wanted the objective numbers to show me where my child was on the assessments. So I turned in the written narrative, but I kept the assessment record for my own records, and our children were fine. They were always at the top end of the scale. No worries were there. Before we move on, there's an important point that I need to remember to help you understand. When you notify, it is a notification of intent. That means if you get a month into a particular curriculum and it just isn't working and you need to change to do something else, you do not have to re-notify. The paperwork you turn in at the beginning of the year is the only point of contact that you need with the school district for that year. So you can adjust and change and adapt and do things differently throughout the year, and it's not a problem. I wanted you to be comfortable with that. I also want you to know that if you're thinking of home educating a child who's coming into middle school or high school years, the high school years are very doable, and CHIO provides support through Homeschool Legal Defense. And every year we try to have a college, high school symposium and a college fair. So whether your child is thinking of career aspirations that would lend toward college or the military or the workforce without college, all of those things can be taken into consideration. There are plenty of resources to help guide you on how to set up a high school curriculum, how to prepare transcripts, how to do all of the pieces and parts that are necessary for a smooth transition for your child into post-secondary years, whatever their decisions would be. We also want you to understand that we worked with the legislature a number of years ago to enact a statute that would protect the diploma issued by the parent when you complete your home education journey. So the parent-issued diploma has to be legally recognized for any requirement in the state that would require a diploma to be shown as a proof of completion. So that is firmly in state law, and you would have no worries on the other end of your experience with your children. So the last thing I need to talk about is placement in school. If for some reason you choose to not home educate down the road, become familiar with rule number 6. The school district of residence is required to enroll or re-enroll your child. They can't say you can't come back. We would encourage you to complete your journey all the way through. But if for some reason or another you don't, it is the school district that determines the grade placement of your child, not the parent. So for that reason, keeping records are helpful, but again, we would encourage you to complete the journey with your child all the way through the high school years. That completes our presentation of the regulations and the notification process. If you feel you have questions that are pertinent to your family situation, please feel free to give us a call. chiohome.org is our website. Our office hours and the telephone number is listed on the website, or you can email us, chio@chiohome.org, or you can join us on Facebook. Christian Home Educators of Ohio is our group page. Then we have an interactive page that is Christian Home Educators of Ohio with the extra CHIO in parentheses at the end. So we are happy to assist whether you are members of CHIO or not. We do encourage you to join our organization with membership because that helps us to stay in business so we can continue serving families. We also encourage families to check out Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They are a national organization of attorneys. It's kind of like having an attorney in your back pocket for about $10 a month or $11 a month, somewhere in that range. You can pay for the entire year. If you pay for your membership to HSLDA for the year and you join our organization first, you can use our group discount code and get a smaller cost to HSLDA's membership, but that's totally up to you. hslda.org is that website. This concludes our presentation. We would love to stay in touch with you, and we are very excited for you about the prospect of this journey that you're about to embark on with your family. Thank you so much.